Hi, welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I'm Matt Connerton, and of course with me, as always, the Honorable Gary S. Hopper. How are you, Gary?
Oh, I freaking, I don't know. Well, I don't know. See, I don't understand terminology. My son has gone through separated from his wife a few months ago, and he's been bummed out. He said he wanted to go clubbing.
Yeah.
Well, I said, that's fine, but I'm getting older. You're gonna have to kind of herd the harbor seals towards me.
Right, right.
You know what I mean? Because I can't really chase them.
Yeah, of course.
So anyway, I guess there's a communication gap. What he meant was going to clubs.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that, so I said, oh, okay, I'll do that. I could probably keep up with that. So we went to Margaritas last Friday night or Thursday night. Mm-hmm. And we're sitting out front because they had, the chairs out front.
Yes.
And there's some wicked pretty girls that go by there.
Sometimes during the day when we're leaving the show, there's some pretty girls that go
It ain't
by.
right. It ain't right. I mean, I felt my hands started sweating, and I started to feel, it's like, so I reached for my
Does your wife watch, by the way?
No, I hope not.
Did that go over his head?
Yeah, so anyway, we're sitting out there, and these pretty girls are going by, and my heart started pounding and stuff like that, and I reached for my the nitroglycerin stuff, but I didn't have it with me, so I figured, well, the next best thing is nitrous oxide.
Right.
So I got a can of whipped cream, and I'm doing some nitrous oxide to kind of calm myself down, trying to make it through,
Sure.
So I look like a mad dog with, this cream all over my face. It was freaking ridiculous.
That's all good. You were at the club.
I was clubbing, so it was good.
Yeah.
So now I know what clubbing is.
That's right.
Normal.
And they didn't have any baby seals there, right?
No, there weren't any baby seals, no harbor seals, nothing. So
No, that's too bad.
it was kind of disappointing, actually, that part of it. But
Yeah. Hi, guys.
There's a certain segment of society that would think by clubbing you meant going out with a club, hitting a woman over the head, and then dragging her by her hair back home. So this
no,
clubbing is clubbing.
my wife doesn't let me do that anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't do that
Is that
anymore.
how you met your wife?
Yeah, of course I did.
That's nice.
I'm that old.
That's good.
How else was I going to get her?
Well,
it's just ridiculous.
Right, yeah.
So anyway, tonight we have Tommy Sharps is with us. He's here because he actually knows about hunting and fishing, because that's what the show is tonight about.
And he has a phenomenal mustache.
And he has a phenomenal mustache. I thought the mustache itself was worthy of TV.
Yes, absolutely.
I think.
Absolutely.
And Glenn Normando, who was here last year, we talked about upcoming season and stuff like that, who's the director of fishing, New Hampshire Fishing Game, was, I don't know. I thought you had better judgment to come on the show. I could understand
I'm wondering
once.
myself.
He came back a second time. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We get a few repeat guests and a few that
You
don't come back.
They don't.
Yeah.
They never come back. They never talk.
Well,
They don't even return my phone calls.
Reminds me of the folks that let us use their fields for pheasant sites. We often don't get
Really?
asked back.
Really?
Hey, this is a question I have. Every 2 years, as a state representative, I get questionnaires. You get them from the pro-life, the anti-life, the pro-gun, the anti-gun, questionnaires all over the place. So I got one from Go New Hampshire. And the whole list of questions, do you support Second Amendment, all that normal stuff. But one of them was a question, do you support open fields policy? Or do you support open fields?
Harvest.
No, it's called the open fields legislation. And I called 3 other legislators, and nobody even knew what they're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know what they're talking about.
And you don't even know what they're talking about. So it must have been something, some national thing that they just copied and pasted or something.
Unless they were talking about our whole issue that we went through the legislature with public access on private lands. And that it's somewhere else that's called something else.
Well, no, they actually that thing. You were there a couple weeks ago when we signed that bill into
That's
law,
correct,
when
yeah.
the
Yep.
governor signed it, which was very awesome. I want to talk about that, but no, that was a separate question. It asked, "Do I support, protecting landowners?" Which I thought was a ridiculous question because we just signed a bill to do that. So
Right.
of course, it seemed kind of. But anyway. I just figured before I forgot I'd ask you that, because I had no
Yeah,
clue what
I
they're
don't
talking
know.
about.
I don't recognize that specific terminology.
So I answered it like I answer all questions as a politician. I said yes, maybe, and not so much.
I'll get back to you.
I'll
on
get
that.
back to you. I got to check with my people.
Yep.
But so I wanted to talk about that. Yeah. Now, can you talk about that lawsuit now that it's over? Last year you couldn't.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you had to kind of.
Well, I mean, the upshot of the lawsuit was that that the person who filed the suit, or the attorney for the person who filed the suit, withdrew it when, during depositions, the person, the property owner, was at the deposition.
Okay, wait, let's back up a second. Last year there was a guy, I think, from Manchester who filed the lawsuit against a guy from
I'm not sure where.
Candia?
No, it was I think in Loudon.
Loudon. And they filed a suit against the guy because he said that he was asked to come on the property to hunt to kill coyotes, and he was using the landowner's tree stand and fell out and really hurt himself pretty good. And so he was suing the landowner, which was huge, because if he was capable of doing that, that meant a lot of people were going to start closing their land to people, because part of the tradition in New Hampshire is if you go on somebody else's land to go hunting or hiking or anything else, your safety is your own concern. If you trip over an old barbed wire and get cut up pretty good, that's your own fault for not stepping over it. And so anyway, that was the lawsuit, and that caused a lot of problems. So
Right.
last year on this show, I think I ended up co-sponsoring that. I didn't do much. Gene Chandler actually did, I think, all
Right,
the
he
legwork
did.
on it. And state rep from up in
He's from Bartlett.
Bartlett, right. He did all the legwork on it. Really good job. We got a bill through and signed by the governor a few weeks ago that basically says if that lawsuit were to happen today, the language is clearer as to what is financial gain, and in the case, and if that lawsuit were to happen today, the guy that filed that lawsuit would have to pay the landowner's court fees. So it's actually
Well, that actually, in the final, the loser pays part of that didn't make the final
Oh, it didn't?
cut. No,
Really?
No, and that's what happens when there's lots of attorneys in the legislature. And however, it did substantially strengthen and clarify the the recreational access law, which basically is that a landowner that leaves their property open for public recreation, in other words, doesn't post it or gives permission to be on it, doesn't have any duty of care to the people that are recreating on it. Now, interestingly, if you post your property and don't let anybody on it, you're not covered. So people who posted who think that they're protecting themselves by posting their property actually have some risk associated with the fact that because it's not open for public recreation, it could be construed that they're not covered under that state law.
wow, that is
Which is something that was a bit of an eye-opener to talk to a few attorneys about. Now, the case itself never went to court. And,
No.
and what happened, and really the angst was that a lot of people perceived that because we had this duty of care law, or even prior to this, they thought they couldn't be sued. Well, anybody can be sued, okay? And even though you're going to win or you're going to get it dismissed, it can still cost you.
Oh yeah.
And although you can petition the court if it's a frivolous suit to award the damages of the attorney's fees, but that's different than having it happen automatically. Your
Yeah.
lawyer's got to petition the court. So this individual's claim was that he and a couple of his buddies went onto the property. They ran into somebody, excuse me, who said he was a property owner that He gave him permission to hunt on the property, and that he told him, you know, go use my tree stand, it's over the hill, and that he said on the condition you shoot any coyotes you see or whatever. So the fellow goes up in this tree stand. Apparently it was a homemade tree stand, a homemade, you know, it was welded metal or whatever. Anyways, he took one step in it, the strap broke, and he took a header like 20 feet down. The individual was seriously injured, and this accident happened, if I'm not mistaken, in 2009. Fish and Game never knew about it until the suit was filed and all of this hoorah began. So the bottom line was that the case rested on the idea of the landowner given permission.
Yeah.
When they went to deposition, the first question from the attorney for the plaintiff, the guy who was suing, was to his own clients when the gentleman who owned the property was there, is this the fellow who gave you permission? And they said, no, it wasn't. And that was the end of the case. The attorney for the plaintiff withdrew it because even assuming everything else they said was correct,
Yeah.
it was not the property owner that gave them permission. We don't know who that person was,
That's
you know,
interesting.
or if
Wow.
the person. But the bottom line
Yeah.
was there was no case
Right.
without the landowner having this conversation.
Yeah.
Right.
So, you know, and the landowner said he had already, you know, told us that, you know, he never saw these people, he never gave him permission, he didn't know there was a tree stand on his property, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, who the mysterious person was, we don't know.
Some
But
mysterious
certainly,
drifter.
but there was somebody, there apparently was somebody, and there certainly was a tree stand.
Did the guy have
Right.
like a long mustache? Do you know?
Beady eyes, bald head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wilford Brimley?
Yeah, well, so that's the story on that case anyway, and I think with these revisions, it will certainly make it even harder when you look at it for an attorney to look at that and go, yeah, no, this isn't.
So there's not an attorney out there theoretically after this that will waste their time even on a case like that.
Right, because you know, I mean, there's always a possibility, and for example, one of the major exceptions is if you pay to be on the property.
Right. Well, it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
That's if you're picking strawberries or picking apples on somebody's property.
Well, it could be for anything, you know. I mean, you just don't know what arrangements people will make. You know, they have a site that they want to do something on, and hey, if I give you a couple $100, will you let me, you know? But it's you know, one of the things this thing did was certify as a cash exchange. You can't go hunting on your somebody's property, be injured, and claim that because, you know, you helped this guy throw some hay bales around that you had compensation for being on there.
Right,
You know,
right.
That's just a friendly exchange. So
Right,
that was
yeah.
one of the issues that was cleared up with this statute. So.
This open field, I've never even heard that term before.
No, I
I've
hadn't
never
either.
heard that.
I couldn't find a legislator even on the Fish and Game Committee that had any idea what they're talking about.
No,
To
it
go
ain't.
along the lines of this conversation is you know, I've got some land up in Stewartstown,
Yep.
up near Diamond Pond, some remote land.
Yeah.
And my brother has a 100-acre piece right next to mine, and we were looking at that. If we would have posted the land, we leave it open. I mean, we've used other people's land all our lives. Why should I block people from using my land?
Right.
That's my theory. But somewhere in my travels, it may have been 30 years ago, I read, it may have been the Constitution about a right to trespass. Forefathers drew up, you had the right to trespass so you could be able to feed your family with hunting and fishing.
Really?
And yeah,
Well, I think, you know, if you look at where we came from in New England specifically, compared to England, okay, where the Crown owned, you know, basically all the land and all the game,
Yep.
and, you know, your life could be forfeit for trespassing, for, you know, I think that
Yeah, if you killed the king's buck.
right, and so I, you know, I think that probably is the was the genesis of why in New England, or especially,
Yeah, New England is-
New
yeah,
England
yeah,
basically, we have this idea that, that the animals are held in the public trust and they're a public resource, and that,
They belong to the state.
generally people should have access to them. But, there are private property rights, and if people choose to post their property, that's their right to do so.
Right.
However, one of the benefits of leaving it open is this statute that gives them immunity from
Right.
from
Prosecution case.
well,
Not prosecution, yeah, but
it's
lawsuits,
really
litigation
it's
anyway.
duty of care that they don't have to be concerned that because somebody trips over their stone wall or breaks an ankle on a loose stone that they have any duty of care to take care of their property for people who may or may not be on it.
Yeah.
And
Well,
and
our
I think,
concern is if somebody's walking on our land, they get a stick in their eye and poke their eye out, they're going to sue us.
yeah, well,
And,
that's
it's like,
know.
how far does it go? Like
Right.
you said,
Right.
like you said, Matt, you can be sued for anything.
Right. Oh yeah.
So if you put up no trespassing signs, they're not supposed to be there in the first place. So
Right.
at least you have a half a leg to stand on.
well,
Right.
you have a half a leg saying they're not supposed to be there, but but say they fall down a well without an old well that isn't covered. Well, then, it could be that there's an argument that, you had a hazard you knew about and you should have dealt with it, which wouldn't matter if you're covered under the duty of care law, but because you're not, things could go further down the road before you can get yourself squared away.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the benefit to leaving your property.
So that was a pretty good accomplishment, even though that didn't have the. Because I thought it still had, when I first co-sponsored, it still had the.
Oh, it did. It did right up until the committee of conference.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think that's where it
Those
disappeared.
jerks. Freaking lawyers, man.
I have to tell you that our forefathers drawing something up like that, and now it's ingrained in us old New Englanders.
Yeah.
We're born and raised with that. Is if the land's not posted, you have the right to trespass.
Right.
Just if the gate's open when you get there, leave it open. If it's closed, close it. Stuff
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. We're taught all that stuff by our fathers and
Yeah.
grandfathers and such. But
It-
but the point I wanted to make is that they drew that up because they came from Europe and they understand that. And I ended up going over to one of my life streams. I was in 4th grade, and I had one of those feathered Indian headbands a little 10-year-old kid would have. I got it for Christmas or something. Well, I made some fishing flies out of it, and I brought it in for show and tell. So I always loved fly fishing.
Yeah.
And my life's dream was to go fly fishing in Scotland. And my wife travels for business, and I go along with her now that I'm retired. We went to Scotland, and one of the guys she works with took me fly fishing in Scotland. What an eye-opener for me is
Loch Ness Monster.
yeah, no, but the rules and regulations. Every drop of water in Scotland, I expect Europe, is owned by somebody. I have a house on the Connecticut River in Pittsburgh. And just because I have a house on the river doesn't mean I have access to that river.
Right.
Somebody owns that 1-mile stretch of river, and they pay taxes on that. So I wanted to go fishing for the day, and we had to pay 50 pounds each for a half day of fishing.
Because you
search
want.
out who owned that piece of river, and it costs us 50 pounds each
Wow.
to fish for half a day just in that one stretch of river. So they own that. The people abutting that don't have the right to fish there.
That's interesting.
And
So-
that's
oh,
how
so
Europe
that's like
set
a
up.
sec-
So when our
sep-
founding fathers came over
They have
here,
those water
they said,
rights.
we're going to draw it up so you have the right to trespass,
Yeah.
unless it's otherwise posted.
Right.
But you have the right to trespass.
Yeah, I get involved in this. I forget why, but there's riparian rights. It's called basically water going through your property. You do not have a right to own it. You have the right to maybe access it, but you don't own it. It is for the common good. So therefore, you don't you don't have a right to.
Yeah.
You don't have a right to dam it. You don't have a right to do anything to it
You have
other
a right
than.
of access because you're a waterfront property owner, which
But
is
that's
which is
it.
more right than the public at large. But you don't own
You don't own the water. You
Yeah.
can't stop it. You can't do anything to it. You got to let it slide on through, and because it's a public
The
benefit.
water's
Yeah.
held in public trust by the state.
Right.
And I expected if that law didn't go through, that there would have been a massive amount of land would have been posted in the
Yep.
state of New Hampshire. And that,
Yeah, some was right off the bat, you know.
Yeah.
And I think,
I think, Glenn, I think you have to be a little closer to the.
sorry.
Yeah,
That's all right.
I'll forgive you someday. Hey, so anyway.
Once I'm forgiven, can I get another job?
Okay, now see, this is a weird one. Did that scuba diving for lobster go through?
No,
It didn't go through.
no.
I know it got through the House.
It was killed in the Senate.
Okay.
no,
What's that about?
Well, okay, you gotta get background on this. Freshman legislator. I'm sitting next to a guy from the Seacoast, Mike Harrington. He says, "Hey, you're on Fish and Game. How about you co-sponsor a bill to allow scuba diving for lobster?" I says, "Sounds good to me. I don't care." Right? Those lobstermen show up in the committee hearing. Okay, they got their lobster traps. They're wicked mad. They're
Yeah.
wicked. I guess they're not known for their gentleness.
No.
No.
Well, and the thing is, this battle gets fought like at least every 2 years.
Really?
It comes
Yeah.
up again.
Yeah.
It's
So
like you can't just put it away.
no,
Yeah.
because somebody called me on that when I was chairman of Fish and Game last year. Somebody called me. The sponsor of that called me and says, "What do you think about it?" I says, "You can do what you want, but I'll tell you, you're barking. It's a bad idea. Not bad idea logically, just a bad idea politically." And I remember going to the House floor as a freshman saying, if you love lobster as I do, you're going to press red and kill the committee report, because the committee killed it outright. And then I still fought it on the House floor, and it still didn't go through because it's just the lobster lobbyists are really strong. And there's nobody on the Seacoast who wants to vote for it because they want to get reelected.
well, they make a living doing that, so.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that even if you're not making a living at it, anybody can buy a 5-trap recreational license and go out and set 5 traps and get lobsters for their own consumption. If you want to go the next step, and a resident, you can go out and buy a 100-trap license that allows you to sell them.
Okay.
Anybody, commercial, any resident can do that.
Okay.
You can't just go buy a 600-trap license anymore. Those are restricted, okay, because of the amount of gear and, it's a resource issue.
Sure.
Well, when committee, it wasn't just a resource issue. It's a function of if you get a 600 trap license, that means you've got X number of dollars invested in a boat.
Oh, yeah.
You got X number of dollars invested in this.
And the
If
gear,
that could
yeah.
be sold from year to year to somebody different, you couldn't afford.
With a limited, right, those licenses, once someone has one,
They keep it.
They have to renew it each year, but it's theirs to renew. It doesn't just go back into a pot.
Sure.
So, but the point I was making is it'd be a different scenario if we only licensed commercial guys in the public as a whole had no access to lobster. Okay, they do have access to lobster. So now you put divers in the mix. Okay, now the way the bill was written, it just, it was somewhat restrictive, obviously trying to get the toe in the door about time of year, this and that, number of lobsters. But, the thing is, first of all, the lobsters are where the pots are. These guys have been lobstering for generations. They
Yeah.
know where the bugs are.
Yeah.
So people aren't going to be swimming around in places with no pots. They're going to be swimming around in places where there's pots, which creates a safety hazard of divers in lobster
depth
boats.
charges.
In depth charges. but one of our biggest concerns with this was, okay, well, you can only take 5 lobsters, but I can tell you, I live in Portsmouth. I've been a water rat running boats down there since I was 14, and then full disclosure, I have a 600 trap commercial license that I've had a long time, and I run 42 of my own traps right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
So the biggest deal to us from a resource issue and from the lobsterman's issue was it was going to take about 2 minutes for a guy who owns a boat to start advertising lobster diving charters. The next thing we know, these guys are saying, well, it's a couple people, it's this, is that. It's no. The first guy with a 38-foot boat who's looking for something to do is going to have 30 people on there with scuba tanks and everything else running out. And because I've seen it happen, with dive charters. I've seen it happen with canoes and kayaks. Like they'll ferry them out to the shoals, and obviously there's the whole party boat, charter boat fishing thing.
Sure.
So we were looking at the potential development here of this little sort of cottage industry, which would be look somewhat limited initially, but suddenly you get a bunch of people going into it. The next time they go to the legislature, we want more and more, and that's what the commercial guys are looking at. Meanwhile, we have a fishery, one of the few that is doing okay, and it's because it's had very stringent management, and basically the state, our state, and the surrounding states are pretty committed to keeping it that way because once you lose it, there is no lobsters left in Long Island Sound now. They're gone.
Really?
Yeah, and they're not going to come back because the water temperature has risen to the point where it's pretty much over down there.
Yeah.
Really?
And,
Why was that just from water coming out of New York and stuff like that? Heated up?
Overfishing?
No, it's getting warmer.
Climate.
Yeah.
If you look at water temperature records of Long Island Sound, they've been steadily rising for decades.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about lobster is they'll grow faster, reproduce faster the warmer the water is, up to the point they die.
Really?
Yeah. They reach the point where they just move out or they'll die. They just can't take those temperatures, and we pretty much think that the western half of Long Island, really boiled down to a water temperature issue. If you look at, we do a shrimp survey every year to help set the shrimp seasons off our coast, and our shrimp are actually an Arctic shrimp. We're at the southern edge of their range. And last year, the bottom temperature in Gulf of Maine was 2 degrees warmer than they'd ever recorded before.
Yeah.
So we've got, we have those issues here potentially, and, lobstering, the guys are,
Do you think it's I don't know if you want to go on record as saying this, but do you think it's just the huge quantity of hot air coming out of Washington, D.C. that's warming?
Well, yeah, it could be.
Oh, yeah, I'm not gonna say anything. Don't get me going. I'm gonna say something. Is that you're a commercial lobster fisherman?
We have a call.
Well, you have a commercial
I
license.
have a commercial license.
And I'm a scuba diver.
Wait, let's just say, let's take call. We only
we
get
got a
calls
call?
once every 6 months.
so
We have a call?
We'll
We
grab
have a
this.
call. Yeah.
Hi, welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. Who's on the line?
Russ,
Russ?
Hi, Russ. How you doing?
how you doing?
What's your question, bud?
Well, I was just listening to him talking about lobster, and I bet just a few years ago there was a big problem in Portsmouth near the electric plant, that the water coming out of there was really warm and they were growing huge.
Actually the issue at if it's what I'm thinking about, was up at the Schiller plant and what was happening was there was a huge quantity of lobsters that were being taken into the intake at Schiller Station, and a couple of the employees there had the bright idea that they could go into the lobster meat business.
Right, and sell them, yeah.
Yeah, so they were
They
taking
were
them
even
all.
taking the shorts.
Yeah, they were taking everything, and when they got busted, they had coolers full of lobster and lobster meat and every other thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's very enterprising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They actually Public Service ended up doing a redesign and construction of that intake to
They've locked it up.
to keep the lobsters from being able to
Okay,
get
I
in
just
there.
thought, give me a buzz, that's
Yeah.
all.
Hey, thank you for the question.
Thanks, Russ.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
So I was on the dive team, the Salem Fire Department, for 15 years
Yeah.
on a recovery team.
And
a
you're
few
gonna,
times
are
we-
you gonna admit to how many lobsters you took illegally? Is that
Well,
what
a
you
few
know?
times we went down the ocean and went no order.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you,
La,
that,
la, 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 la.
now this is 30. This is 35 years ago, so I'm sure the statute of limitations.
Yeah.
But,
Well, I suppose there's a lot of things
but
I did.
no, what I'm going to
35
tell
years
you,
ago
what I'm going to
that
tell
we
you
talk
is
about
that
now.
I'm probably going to, my house is probably going to get shot at.
Right, but whatever.
But as a diver,
as long as you don't got any monk parrots, you're all right.
and look at the traps. You know, we'd see the lobster traps down there. I'd pick them up, and there'd be more lobsters under the trap than there'd be in the trap.
Yeah.
And I can imagine if I got a lobster bag in my hand, and I go by and there's 3 or 4 nice 2-3 pounders in that trap. who's
Pretty
gonna know?
easy. Yeah, who's going to know?
So
Yeah.
he-
It's been a
people
while
with
since I've
commercial-
seen 3 or 4 nice 2 or 3 pounders in a trap, but
It could happen.
it could happen.
Could happen. Could happen. So anyway, what other legislation did pass? I didn't know that one got killed.
Yeah,
so.
it got killed in committee in the Senate.
Yeah.
So, geez.
We had a bunch of gun bills that didn't go anywhere. They died on the table in the Senate.
Yeah, we weren't involved in, I think typically Fish and Game as
Excuse me.
an agency does not get,
Tries to stay out of those.
stays out of the whole gun issue unless, I think the one that the only issue we weighed in on had to do with being able to have loaded long guns in a vehicle.
Right. That failed.
Yeah.
That failed. Right.
I mean, we had no trouble with pistols and, with pistol permits and all that, but, when you got someone at night jacking deer, they're not doing it with a 9mm handgun. They got a rifle or whatever poking out the window.
It's like
Yeah.
when Tommy's out jacking trout, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah, same thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So for us, that's aside from the safety issue. I mean, every year, we'll end up with a road hunter somewhere that's got a, half his foot missing because he got it with the shotgun while he was trying to maneuver the thing out the window to
Oh,
blasted
wow.
a grouse off the road, or
Oh no,
yeah, and
really?
I've got to tell you that's got to hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're in a vehicle, you've got a loaded weapon, and you're, it's not a handgun, and it really,
so
it
you're-
really is a safety
Yeah.
issue.
So you're recommending that if people are jacking deer, shooting grouse, they should use a handgun?
Well, it's the
I'd like to
safer.
comment on that, but I have no experience in that area.
None whatsoever.
Wow.
Not even 35 years ago?
Back when I was drinking, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Can't remember then.
Can't
Yeah,
remember
blackout.
now. Yeah.
Hard saying,
Blackout
not knowing.
And so what else? What else is going on? Or what else did we pass? We didn't pass anything then, really, of significance.
Well, there was a few other things I'm trying to remember. I know we did some budgetary stuff revolving around the Jones Pond Dam and other things that went through capital. I'm trying to think here. There was some ATV stuff that we were associated with that I'm not as familiar with as Captain Wimsat is our ATV guy
Yeah,
now. Since
Well, last term, I think it was last term, I introduced legislation to change the ATV license, because if somebody was getting a new ATV in the spring, they had to register it in the spring and then re-register it in June.
right.
And so I introduced legislation, and we got it through last term to change it. So if it's a new registration, they can register it in the spring, and it carries through to the next
period.
year.
Right.
So, but it's a little higher rate, but you didn't have to turn around and re-register the thing, 2 months
Right.
later.
Yeah.
Right.
But that was
Yeah.
that was last term, not this term.
That caused us some heartburn.
Got that 14
Oh, we
month-
did? It did?
Well, the problem, basically the COs can tell at a distance whether the thing's registered or not by the color of the decal.
Yeah.
Oh.
So you have the wrong color decal, and let's say it's 2 months ahead before the next color decals come out for the following year.
Oh, no way. Okay.
So,
That's
so
awesome.
there was those are the sort of things that that some of these things are good in conception,
Yeah.
but when we get to the details of how we have to, actually deal with things like the license stickers and this
Yeah.
and that and the other thing, they're a heartache for the and costly for the licensing division that has
Sure.
to get stuff printed, and and a lot of the printing and whatnot is done 6 months ahead of time the orders are placed. So
Yep.
so, a piece of legislation can come through, and, the saltwater fishing license was a classic. We got a saltwater fishing license in of the $15, and 6 months into it, the legislature reduces it by $5. Well,
I thought it was $4.
no, it's five. It's 15 plus the dollar agent fee. It went to 10 plus the dollar agent fee. Okay. Well, I begged and pleaded with them and they assured me that in fact it would be the case, and it wasn't. That they would leave it alone. That when they reduced it, it would run the calendar year. You got to remember the state runs on a fiscal year, July 1 to June 30. But all our licenses run on a calendar year.
Oh, okay.
So here we are, come July 1, we found out like the week before that the thing was going to be effective immediately. So we got 6 months worth of people who've bought a license and are unhappy that they paid $5 more than what they're going for now.
Right.
And there's nothing we can do about it because the legal price was X and the
Those
legislature
guys like
made
Gary,
X.
it's their fault.
Yes.
And then not only that, but all those license blanks had been printed. All our regulations are printed.
Oh, wow.
All that stuff's out there. So now we got conservation officers at a high rate of money, not doing what they should be doing, running around to every agent in the state, trying to post, signs up saying, and we printed them out in fluorescent orange. We told all our agents, but the fact is the license says $15 on it.
Yeah.
We got no way of knowing what the agent charged.
Oh, no way.
There's no way, because
Yeah.
they're sending their reconciliations back. If the guy gave them
$15. You
15,
wouldn't
they
know.
throw a 10 down, put a 5. We would have no way of
Yeah.
understanding. And now, we never heard any, no one that I'm aware of that we had any of those problems. But as soon as we heard this, we were concerned because there would have been nothing we could do to track that to see if, in fact, there was an issue.
Yeah.
So that was one of those things that was just really...
So why do you even talk to us in the legislature?
forced to? And
That's why you send Sandy Falcon over, because she's
Sandy's my legislative liaison, and
yeah,
she's
yeah.
the one that
Has
is
to deal
there
with
every
that.
day when they're in session, keeping track of what's going on, so that we know.
She's the one that has to deal with people like Gary.
Well,
Yeah.
you got to understand, by statute, the commission it sets the position of the department on legislation. So every bill, when when the session starts, she'll start tracking every bill that's filed, and anything that she thinks has anything to do with fish and game will come to the legislative committee of the commission. We'll look at it. We'll decide if it's something we just want to follow. Should we take a position on it? What's that position, or do we just track it? And then that'll be taken to the full commission for a full commission vote. And whatever that vote is, regardless of, the staff will say this is what we think about it, but ultimately the commission will determine what the department's position is. And and then come time for hearings and whatnot, whoever the appropriate person is will testify to that position, on whatever. Or we
Right,
may
right,
decide we may decide in the end that we just going to monitor it to see what happens, but it turns out it's not something that is really that is an issue to us. So
Yeah, I remember it was the beginning of this term, or last year, was the monk parrots, the fishing
yeah,
game.
that was last year.
Yeah,
Now, what was that? I remember you talking about this before, but I forget what that was
There-
exactly.
We had a parrot that was on our list of species that was illegal to have.
Okay.
And the reason it was illegal to possess was that in some areas, these things had gotten away and grown colonies that were a real problem in
Really?
the wild.
Oh, huge. I
And
think
they actually really liked to be on power poles and stuff.
Oh, okay.
And the utility companies were very unhappy to have to deal with these monk parakeets. So,
Yeah.
so we ended up finding out, I think it was almost by accident, that some woman was raising these things in her cellar.
She
and selling
called.
them. Oh yeah, well,
She called.
I met her, and
Yeah, well, this is like saying something like, this is my analogy. At least I used when I was talking to people in the house. Like somebody calling up saying, "Well, I just found out that the 45 marijuana plants I have in my attic are illegal. What should I do with them?"
so she had some 30 or something of these birds.
Yeah, yeah.
So immediately, we found out about it. We're trying to deal with it. We're, of course, immediately the bad guys. So we have a law, that we're obligated to enforce.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the pro parakeet folks, immediately filed to pull these off. We did a bunch of research, and it turned out that most of these colonies got started from wild birds that were captured down in
South America?
mostly in Brazil, I think. They were brought back, and then groups of them would get out. Most of the birds around today are bred from captive birds, so they're not used to being out foraging on their own. Blah blah blah. The captive bird group is much less likely to create one of these problems, and an escapee tends to be one here, one there. That isn't going to happen with with these. What was happening is you'd have an accident somewhere, and 50 of these wild birds would escape in one shot, and within a couple of years, they had problems with them in Connecticut. They had problems with them in Chicago. So we determined, that the risks associated with them were really not what they were advertised to be in the past, simply because of changes in where they're coming from.
Sure.
So we just kind of went along for the ride and let the bill, and the bill went through, and the parakeet people were happy. And
Is there a very powerful pro-parakeet lobby?
well,
No.
there's a pretty powerful lobby for everything. You
Yeah,
just need to bring the topic up
Well, no,
somewhere along
no.
the way, and a lot of people will show up.
Yeah.
There's a huge lobby for anything that's tiny and cute.
Yeah. Well,
Okay,
that's
if
true.
the damn things were ugly, it never would have passed. But what happened in the legislature this term versus every other term I've been up there is you had a huge libertarian infestation. I probably shouldn't say that. So it was like a property rights issue and all this other crap when it got to the House floor. To me, it was just a bad idea, because if you do look at the monk parakeets where they are in Connecticut, what happens is they're really kind of cool. Because they adapt to colder climates. They're from a really warm climate, but what they do to adapt to a warmer, colder climate is they just make their nest huge, which
Really?
insulates them in the winter.
Yeah, they build these huge nest colonies of these giant twig nests that are, it almost looks like an enormous beehive surrounding the utility pole.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they're wicked.
50, 75, 100 birds are all living in this one.
Wow. So instead of flying south, they do that.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
they didn't
kidding.
fly south where they came from.
Right,
They stayed
that's
where
true.
they
Yeah,
were.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I
interesting.
mean, ultimately, they might not be able to live in a northern New Hampshire location, but
Yeah.
they were thriving in a couple of spots in Connecticut. And we talked to the utility company down there, and they had major problems with them
Yeah.
shorting out a substation and those sorts of issues.
Sure, sure.
But again, most of those things happened a while ago, and the colonies were established by when a bunch of wild birds escaped at once.
Yeah.
So, we felt like now we can let it, you know, that we weren't going to stand in the way of
You were going to
being.
fall on your sword over the monk parakeets.
Yeah, that's
No.
exactly
Yeah.
it. You know, some things aren't, you know,
Aren't worth
aren't
fighting.
worth the battle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Huh.
Well, we were talking about ATVs a little bit earlier, and I've been thinking about a conversation I had with Chris Egan up in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
That somebody got arrested for DWI on a four-wheeler,
Right.
and he was on his own farm, so he was on private property. And what I wasn't aware of, and what everybody out here might want to be aware of, is even though you're on your own private property, you can still be arrested for drunk driving.
That's
And-
interesting.
And he said that if you're acting like an idiot, like jumping off a 30-foot cliff and you hurt yourself and the ambulance has to come, then you can get arrested for driving to endanger on your own private property. And
I didn't know that.
that's, I didn't either, and I'm sure a lot of people
I thought you
out there
could be
don't
wicked
know that.
stupid as long as you stayed on your own property.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna
I mean,
drive
I don't
drunk-
drink. I've told I don't drink at all because I'm allergic to it. Because I break out in handcuffs. So
Yeah.
yeah, but
Only drink when you're alone and with somebody. Is that the?
But being from New Hampshire, I always thought that what you do on your own property is your own business. But
Yeah.
Yeah,
once an outside agency gets involved, like an ambulance,
Yeah.
then it
Yeah.
becomes a whole different story.
yeah, I didn't know that.
well, that's of
I
course
didn't
public
either.
money then. So.
No.
Right.
Oh, I wanted to ask you about. We had a discussion a little bit about before. If somebody hits a wild animal when they're driving down the road, what's the proper course of action?
Well, the proper course of action is leave it or call a conservation officer. Conservation officer can get, you know, if you wanted to take that animal, say you hit a deer, he'll give a transportation tag so that, any other CO or whatever will know that it's legal for you to have it.
Yeah.
And that can be issued to, we can authorize police departments and whatnot to do the same thing. The state police will say, yeah, throw it in your car or whatever.
Yeah.
Basically, without such tag, having a game animal out of season in your vehicle is kind of like, prima facie evidence that you took something out of season. So,
Right.
and you wouldn't be the first guy that hit the gas when he saw a flock of turkeys in the road, hoping for the best either.
Right,
So, I think a phone call can take care of that
Okay.
typically. But it actually goes for almost any wild animal really.
Well, they're property of the state.
The
state
property of the
owns it.
state, exactly.
And like I was talking earlier, and I was 10 years old, and I had a trap line. I used to check my trap on the way to school. I had a half a dozen or so.
Trap for what?
For muskrat, mink,
Okay.
beaver.
Yeah.
And I was told by the trappers that taught me that was that if you find a dead mink or a dead muskrat on the side of the road, you can't just pick it up, take it home, skin it out, and sell it. You have to get permission from the state because the state owns that, even though it's dead.
Yeah.
And you can get in a lot of trouble for that.
Bobcats are a big one. We've always got people who want to take a bobcat that they found that's dead on the side of the road, and can I take it home and mount it? And and a bobcat is not at the moment. It's protected.
It's not even a game animal.
Right. So we're we're reassessing now. We're in like the third year of a 4-year study on the bobcat population, and maybe depending on the vagaries of the world, it could become a game animal again. But regardless, we really tend not to give those out because you give one and suddenly you start to wonder who's trying to hit one on purpose.
Right. Yeah.
Another thing is raptors are the same way. Guy will, hit who knows what, an eagle, a red-tailed hawk, or whatever. They're down on the roadside getting something else that got hit by a car. And again, you don't really want to make it easy for people to kill something on purpose and then be able to claim that it was a...
All right. So that brings me my next question, which is, what's the deal with the mountain lions? We keep here. Front page of the Union Leader. The mountain lion. There was a video of a guy thought it was a mountain lion near one of the local schools.
The bottom line is this. To my knowledge, in the last, I don't know, 40, 50 years,
Yep.
there was 4 mountain lions in New England that were
Verified?
verified.
Okay.
And in those 4 cases, they all had been, somebody's pet that they released or, were holding illegally. Until just this past year, there was a mountain lion that was killed on the road in Connecticut. It was a 140-pound female in very good condition. And that has been genetically tracked. Why it came to Connecticut, we have no idea, but it started its world.
Joe Lieberman brought it there.
Yeah.
And where?
Well, it started in I think it was either South Dakota or Iowa.
Really?
Yeah, and we actually have DNA evidence of several other states it was in before it got to.
Might have
How do you?
history-
Wait. That intrigues me. How do you get DNA evidence of it in different states?
Scat,
Really?
yeah, finding a kill. So along with that, we have had, I can't tell you how many times I've been emailed photos. I took this shot out my back window last night, It's like I'm looking at it going, wow, I didn't know we had Ponderosa pines in New Hampshire. I mean,
Yeah.
the thing is, the internet and Photoshop, it's made it very difficult to know whether you're seeing a legitimate claim or not. People can do anything with pictures.
Yeah.
All we want is some physical evidence, and we've yet to have a track. We've yet to have, one killed on the road. People are like, there seems to be this idea that, somehow we're stalking them by helicopter and not telling anybody. I can tell you, we'd be happy to, if we saw one,
Yeah.
and to say we verified it, and we're not saying that people are lying.
Right.
We just are like we're just looking for the goods
Yeah.
to rock solid prove it.
Well, somebody that's not familiar with mountain lions, and they see a good-sized bobcat, that could be a mountain lion to them.
Well,
They've never seen a
and
bobcat before either.
occasionally a bobcat. I've seen a couple of bobcats that were in the 50-pound range, which is right at the max. And I'll tell you, if you've got nothing else to compare it to, that is a big kitty. And I've got some pictures of one taken with a game camera over a deer we found that had its throat ripped out, and it had catched it, and so we put it.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, when you see the deer laying there and this cat next to it, you're going, whoo.
Yeah.
But there was no
yeah.
doubt, that it was a bobcat.
I lived in Northern California for a few years, back in the early 2000s, and we saw 100. We figured 180-pound male mountain lion, and he was 200 or 300 yards away.
Well-
there's no mistake
Yeah.
when you look at a mountain lion. It's a mountain lion.
The thing is, one of the mountain lion's favorite foods is deer.
Yep.
And one of the things we pay attention to a lot and actually do counts and whatnot are deer yards. So when we have a decent winter, which we didn't last year, but when we have a decent winter and deer are yarding up, especially in the north country halfway down, we do surveys of those yards. We have them mapped out. A lot of these have been in the same place for years, and when there's logging going on, we try to get the logging companies to leave them alone, et cetera, et cetera. And, one of the things that has been a mystery to us is if we indeed had a decent, any sort of population of mountain lions in the wild, if I was a mountain lion and I was hungry in the wintertime, I'd be laying in these deer yards.
Right.
And we've yet to find the evidence of a dead deer with mountain lion tracks around it and that sort of
or
stuff.
scat.
Or scat.
some kind
I'm
of-
telling you, we'd be, contrary to what everyone thinks, we'd be the first ones to get up
Yeah.
and shout and say, hey, we did find
We
one.
finally
Well,
get
there's
confirmation.
people who say they've seen Bigfoot in New Hampshire too.
Yeah, well, I know.
I've never seen a mountain lion track in New Hampshire.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I've
but
never seen a
that's
Bigfoot
why I
track
quit
in New
drinking.
Hampshire.
So anyway,
So,
hey,
but-
no, we gotta wrap it up. We got we're on the -1 minute mark. But anyway, I want to thank you very much. Unless there's a quick point you want to.
nope. All I'll say on the mountain lions is, I'll tell you, if we see one, everyone will be the first to know.
Wolves. Any wolves in New Hampshire?
Not that we're aware of.
The coyotes are part
The
wolf.
coyotes are part wolf genetically.
Red wolf. Red
I could be 15 minutes on that topic.
Yeah, but that was those are the French wolves
That's correct.
from Montrebec. So anyway,
I'm actually a werewolf. That's why I'm so hairy.
I know. Glenn, thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having
Tommy,
me.
thanks for coming on the show.
thanks for asking
It's
me.
Matt, right?
Matt, yes.
yeah,
Good.
thank you,
You're doing
too.
so good.
Yeah, and remember, don't feed the bears.
Don't
Yes.
feed the
Good
bears.
advice.
I'm
Little
a bear
deal-
hunter. I disagree with that.
Yeah, well, hey, there's going to be Tommy and I were talking about earlier. There's going to be a lot of hungry bears this year because there's not many apples, not many berries.
Not many
so
berries, yep.
make sure you don't leave food outside because they'll come a knocking.
Radio. Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.